Hey everyone, this is Andy with Guitar Interactive Magazine, and for the last few weeks I have been reviewing a pair of Tascam VLS5 Nearfield monitors. See one of them sitting on the desk just behind me there. It's a fairly standard size, fairly standard look for its kind of class of speaker. It's got a 5¼ inch Kevlar main driver driven by a 40-watt internal amplifier and a 1-inch soft dome tweeter driven by a separate 30-watt internal amplifier. The specs on the speakers are kind of fairly mediocre, if we're quite honest. They quote a frequency range of 60 Hz through to 22 kilohertz, and that 60 is maybe just a few hertz higher than I'd have expected for this kind of speaker. But ultimately, as the specs don't tell me what actually happens at that point, whether that's like a -1, a -3, a -6 dB point, it's all a little bit meaningless if we're quite honest about it. What is slightly unusual about this speaker though is the fact that it is set with the crossover, which is the electronics which handle the transition from the main driver to the tweeter, a little bit higher than usual. So it's set for crossover at 3.2 kilohertz. And the idea there is that the all-important mid-range doesn't get any crossover distortion. It's kind of not part coming out of one speaker, part coming out of the other when you're listening to it. And the idea of that is to keep the mid-range sort of very clean and clear as much as it can be. It's a rear-ported speaker, very simple setup. So let's have a look at that in a little bit more detail and see what we've got. Okay then, so front of the unit, very simple. You've got this quite attractive moulding fitted to the front, and it is holding the 5¼ inch Kevlar domed woofer, and at the top there we've got the 1-inch soft domed tweeter. If we just turn that round, and then there's the back panel, and it's one of the simpler ones you'll see on a set of speakers. This is the power input section, and depending on your market you may or may not have a voltage selector, but you will have the mains inlet and a power switch. Audio inputs on balanced XLR and TRS sockets, and the documentation says that you can use this as an unbalanced input too. A 40mm rear-facing bass reflex port that moves some serious air, so you've got to be just a little bit careful about putting the speakers right up against a wall or in a corner, and a simple volume control. So none of the space controls for 1/2 or 1/4 space, which is up against a wall or in a corner, that you get on some other units. I did not find these speakers to be very sensitive to where you put them. Sure, you put them right against a wall, you put them right in a corner, you get more bottom end out of them, and if you're not careful it can overwhelm and sort of wreck the balance of the speaker. But with a little bit of reasonable positioning, I actually managed to get them sounding just the way I wanted them. And sometimes not having those switches can reduce the option anxiety, where you're constantly thinking, am I hearing my mix, or am I actually hearing the adjustments that I've been making on my speakers? So not particularly missed in the sort of final run of things. So that's what you get, but what do they like to use? So 2 questions you always have to think about with things like monitors. 1 is it any good? And 2 is, do I actually like it? The is it any good question is largely taken care of because manufacturers over the last 10-15 years seem to have figured out how to produce speakers that are well made using decent componentry and that sound far better than their pricing should ever allow. And that's certainly what I think Tascam's managed to do here. On the quality front, there's something I just have to mention, and it's not a big deal, but one of the pair of speakers had a little bit of a mains hum on it. When I plugged it in, powered it on, I got a buzz coming out of it. Now, it wasn't in the audio path, it didn't get louder with volume control turned up, and it was not dependent on having anything plugged into it, so it's just purely coming off the speaker, and it's probably something vibrating away in the power supply unit for the amplifiers. If I bought the other speaker was absolutely fine, and if I bought a pair of these, I would simply return the one under warranty, get it replaced and be happy with it, but just have to mention that. So the second question of, do you actually like it? Now, one of the things that really helped for me was that the speakers have a familiar kind of sound. I mix on a variety of speakers and headphones, but my general Nearfields are a small pair of Neumanns, which I'm sort of very used to. I've used them for quite some years, and I just like the way that they sort of transition between the lower through the mids up to the higher frequencies, and also they're kind of quite snappy speakers. They've got a good time response as well as frequency response. And when I started listening through the Tascams, what I found was that the sound is generally in a similar vein to what my Neumanns do. So that kind of helped me to understand what I was hearing straight away. They're not quite as good in any one way as my Neumanns, but when you look at them and realise that they actually cost 20% of what those other speakers cost me, as someone who's spent the money, I'm kind of going, whoa. As someone who might be going out to actually spend the money, I'd be going, whoa, that's great. You know, I can get something which will do a similar job. And the most important factor, I found that the mixed decisions that I was making on the Tascams were pretty much the same as the mixed decisions that I was making on my Neumanns. So, you know, a good result all around there. Now, that doesn't mean that you like them. You might give them a try and think that the top end may sound soft to you. You may want something that's got far more kick in the bottom end of it. But whether it's a result of just general manufacturing design, whether it's something to do with that slightly higher than usual crossover frequency, there's definitely something that's very clear and very easy to mix on about these. So if the question comes down to, I'm looking for some monitors, what should I consider? If this is the price bracket that you're looking at, absolutely put a pair of these Tascams on your list, go and try them. You may love them as I do. They may not be your thing at all, and you know that's going to happen however good, bad or indifferent a piece of kit is. But as far as the quality goes, that one little issue with the buzzer side, I think they come across as being a good, simple but solid set of speakers. As far as my liking them goes, it just happens that my bias is very much in the direction that Tascam have built into these. I think they punch well above their weight. I think Tascam have done a great job on them, and on a personal level, I would absolutely recommend them. So, I'm Andy Picker, this is Guitar Interactive Magazine. Take care and see you next issue.